Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Hearsay Readers Theater 2020. We're very excited to share these stories with you today, but I'd like to take a moment to have the members of the Hearsay team introduce themselves. I'm Caroline Prelow. I'm a writer and designer at the Memory and Aging Center and the Global Brain Health Institute at UCSF. And I'd like to introduce Erin Vong.
Good morning, I'm Erin Vong and I'm the Education Specialist at Voice of Witness.
And Jennifer Mariles.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Mariles. I'm a nurse at the Memory and Aging Center and part of the Hearsay team.
And Cliff Mayotte.
Morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cliff Mayotte. I'm the Education Program Director for Voice of Witness and have been part of the Hearsay team since its inception in 2016.
Yeah. And we'd like to thank everyone at GBHI for their continued support of the Hearsay Project. And we look forward to adding today's story to the growing story archive, which will be accessible via the new GBHI website this fall. So before we begin, we'd like to briefly describe the project in today's program.
The Hearsay Project began as a collaboration between the Memory and Aging Center at the University of California, San Francisco and Voice of Witness in 2016. Our goal was to forge space for patients, caregivers, doctors, family members, researchers, nurses, artists, and more to share stories of aging, dementia, art, work, and life. We wanted to shed light on the personal and rarely heard day-to-day experiences of aging and dementia, and through the oral history process, reduce the stigma and othering that occurs by perpetuating a single story.
The project expanded in 2018 to include the Global Brain Health Institute and worked directly with the Atlantic Fellows for Equity in Brain Health, an international cohort dedicated to protecting the world's aging populations from threats to brain health. This expansion also included the making of a documentary film with Cynthia Stone Media. The Hearsay Project aspires to help others see the meaning and beauty in the experiences of others, for the stories and the feelings that drive them, to ripple outwards to a global community that recognizes the need for action and empathy in caring for our aging population.
The Hearsay oral history excerpts we're going to hear today came out of a recently completed summer selective online course with our fellows and GBHI staff at UCSF and Trinity College in Dublin. In keeping with the global scope of the project, you will hear readings in a variety of languages. In between each story, there will be a brief musical interlude played by GBHI alumni specialist Camelia Rodriguez-Sackburn. Thank you again for joining us, and please enjoy Hearsay's Readers Theater.
COVID-19, a phony war. Interview by Yaohua Chen, and read in French by Yaohua Chen and in English by Sarah D'Alessio. Dominique is a senior physician in geriatrics in France. She is responsible for part of the long-term care facilities and at the same time, the head of the day hospital for cognitive disorders. She talked about the strange and traumatic experience she and her team had in the early phase of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Covid-19, une drôle de guerre. Je suis Dominique, j'ai 52 ans et j'ai 3 enfants. Depuis le début de mes études de médecine en tant qu'externe, je suis passée dans les services de long séjour et ça m'a plu. Je me suis dit que quand je serai grande, c'est ça que je veux faire, m'occuper des personnes âgées. À l'époque, le chef de la gériatrie m'a proposé un poste au batelier et donc ça fait 25 ans que je travaille ici. En fait, en EHPAD, on est 2 médecins et on a une centaine de lits. Ma collègue est à mi-temps. Donc, moi, je gère une unité d'une 30aine de personnes en direct et j'assure la continuité des soins quand elle n'est pas là, ce qui n'est pas simple. Ça fait donc la moitié du temps les 100 résidents, plus mon activité de consultation et d'hôpital de jour. Pour le Covid, je ne sais pas s'il y a eu un épisode le plus difficile. En fait, c'était la succession pour nous, l'histoire en gériatrie. Enfin, ici, ça a commencé le 11 mars. Parce que le 11 mars, on a reçu un message et après, j'ai reçu un coup de fil du directeur en disant « Voilà, directive nationale, on ferme l'EHPAD, on ferme les portes aux familles. » Ah bon? Et donc, il a fallu expliquer aux familles qui étaient là qu'il faut partir, quitter leurs personnes âgées, leur maman ou leur papa, leur tante, ce que tu veux, et qu'ils n'allaient pas revenir. On ferme les portes aux visites. Et donc, ce soir-là, je suis restée jusqu'à 9 h du soir pour accompagner les familles et les équipes, les hôtesses, dire au revoir. Donc, ça a été assez poignant. Pour moi, ça a été très traumatisant. J'en ai rêvé pas mal. On savait un peu ce qui se passait en France puisqu'on avait des retours de l'Est avec les écrits de nos collègues gériatres avec les décès. Et donc, du coup, moi, je me souviens d'un monsieur qui m'a dit « Je vous confie ma maman ». Et moi, je me suis dit « Oh là là, ça va être compliqué. C'est mal parti ». Plusieurs personnes m'ont dit comme ça. Donc, le soir du mercredi, je finissais mes consultations. Ça a été très compliqué. Et le lendemain, les gens n'étaient pas encore confinés. Ils sont venus à l'accueil, ont été bloqués. Ben non, c'est fini, c'est fermé, c'est fermé. Et donc, du coup, je me suis retrouvée avec les hôtesses, avec je ne sais combien de paquets. Vous donnerez ça à ma maman? C'est des chocolats et puis vous lui ferez un bisou. C'était marqué « Maman, je t'aime, je ne t'oublie pas ». J'ai fait lingère et porteuse de paquets avec les équipes. Pour nous, le Covid a commencé ici, au batelier, comme ça. Et puis après, plus rien. Et là, pendant plusieurs semaines, rien. J'ai dit à mon mari, on dirait mes grands-parents me parlaient de la drôle de guerre. On tournait en rond, on était tous confinés, on ne faisait plus de consultations, tout était fermé, mais il ne se passait rien dans les étages. C'était vraiment la drôle de guerre. En 1939, on attendait les Allemands qui ne sont pas venus, puis ils sont venus beaucoup, beaucoup plus tard.
COVID-19, a phony war. I'm Dominique. I'm 52 years old and I have 3 children. Since the beginning of my medical studies as an intern, I've been in long-term care services and I liked it. I told myself that when I grow up, that's what I want to do, take care of the elderly. At the time, the head of the geriatrics department offered me a job in the Batelier hospital. So I've been working here for 25 years. In fact, in the nursing home, we are 2 doctors and we have about 100 beds. My colleague is part-time, so I manage a unit of 30 people directly and ensure continuity of care when she's not here, which is not easy. So that's half the time for the 100 residents, plus my consultation and day hospital activities. For COVID, I don't know what was the most difficult period. Actually, it was the progression for us, as all other stories in geriatrics. I mean, here it started on March 11th, because on March 11th, we got a message, and then I got a phone call from the director saying, here are the national guidelines. We're closing the nursing home. We're closing the doors to families. Are we? And so, well, we had to explain to the families who were there that they had to leave their elderly people, their mom or dad, their aunt, whatever you want, and that they're not going to come back. The doors are closed to visitors. And so that evening, I stayed until 9 p.m. to accompany the families, the teams, the hostesses. So saying goodbye was pretty poignant. For me, it was traumatic. I dreamt a lot about it. We knew a little bit about what was happening in France because we were getting feedback from the East with the writings of our geriatric colleagues with the deaths. And so as a result, well, I remember a gentleman who said to me, I entrust you with my mother. And I thought, oh la la, it's going to be complicated. It's not going to go well. Several people told me that. So on Wednesday evening, I was finishing my consultations and it was very complicated. The next day, people were not yet confined. They came to the reception and were blocked. Oh no, it's over, it's closed, it's closed. And so as a result, I found myself with the hostesses with I don't know how many packages. You'll give this to my mom? It's chocolates and you'll give her a kiss? One said, Mommy, I love you, I won't forget you. So I've been a linen maid and a package carrier with the teams. For us, COVID started here at the Batelier just like that. And then after that, nothing. And then for a few weeks, nothing. I said to my husband, I guess my grandparents were right to tell me about the phony war. We were going around in circles. We were all confined. We didn't do any more consultations. Everything was closed, but there was nothing going on upstairs. It was really the phony war. In 1939, we waited for the Germans who didn't come. and then they came much later.
I have, through prayer, learned to. Interviewed and read by Mindy Matice. Marie M., a nonagenarian, has, during COVID-19, gone from being a primary caretaker to the sole caretaker of her younger sister, Mabel, who has pretty advanced vascular dementia and is living at home alone.
My name is Marie Irene. I'm 91. I'm going to be 92 in February. My sister's name is Mabel Nora. I've got another sister whose name is Alice, but Mabel needs my help. Mabel is 82. She's going to be 83 this year. Mabel is such a strong person, and I love her dearly. I don't think I would have the strength to fight the fight she's gone through in the last 10 years, 20, 15 now, 20 years. She's got a strong constitution. My husband and I became her primary caretakers many years ago. She loved him, but he did everything for her that she needed done or doing around the house. And anything he said, she accepted. Anything I said, she denied. But my husband died about 2 years ago, April 29th, 2018. So I've been taking care of her on my own since then. We're just oil and water together. But I admire her tenacity and her ability to cope. She still gets out of bed a lot earlier than I do every day. So how have things changed since COVID-19 began? I have, through prayer, learned to try to keep my temper, try to keep things calm. And it's getting more and more difficult for Mabel to speak in sentences. Her grasp of her vocabulary has gone down quite a bit since her communication with people every day that she used to see has gone down. She's very gregarious and she loves to talk to people with their dogs as they go by the house. I think she's lost a lot of that. And because of her loss of physical contact with people around her and the fact that her caregivers haven't been there, they had their families to care for and they quit coming, which I understood, families first. And Mabel, she fights wearing a mask, and Mabel had friends coming in, and one of her caregivers was a worker at one of the local hospitals. And I felt, even though she was very cautious, I really didn't want her coming back, primarily because of she could be infected anytime by any of the patients. So that's accelerating Mabel's loss of vocabulary and her sentence structure and what she calls things. I ask her to stand up straight, and that bothers her. That makes her mad. She will not use a walker. I had bought her a nice new walker. And I think there's a lot of shame to her to have to use a walker, but it's a safety thing because I can't hold her up. So Marie, what are some of the joys of doing this? Oh, I think I've been blessed because I have the time now to do these things and to keep a positive attitude when I'm around her. The happiness that just a peek in and to share a memory or a book or a poem, anything upbeat, it's very important. It's very important to share your love.
Carmen and her mother, Teodora, are from Ticaco, Peru. Carmen was interviewed by Maritza Pintado Caipa. This story will be read in Spanish by Maritza and in English by Lucia Lopez.
Memorias de vida. La primera vez que vi a Teodora fue en unos videos en Facebook. Ella estaba leyendo y haciendo origami. Quedé muy curiosa de conocerla, por lo que en medio de mi cuarentena en Perú, me contacté con su hija Carmen. Carmen me contó que Teodora nació en 1925 en Ticaco, un pequeño pueblo cuyo nombre deriva de las voces aymaras Tica Haku, que significa lugar de flores vistosas, ubicado en la zona altoandina de Tarata, en Tacna, Perú. Con el fin de que Teodora se casara a sus 16 años, siendo una de las señoritas más bonitas del pueblo y siguiendo antiguas costumbres, sus padres la encerraron con un ingeniero que venía de Lima y estaba de paso en el pueblo. Producto de este encierro, Teodora tuvo a su primera hija, pero nunca se realizó el matrimonio. Después de pocos años y al ser Teodora madre soltera, sus padres propiciaron otro encierro, esta vez con un aduanero, quien también pasaba por el pueblo, y de este encierro nació su segunda hija, pero el matrimonio tampoco se concretó. Teodora tuvo que convertirse en padre y madre para sus dos pequeñas hijas. A sus 23 años, Teodora decidió dejar su pueblo y dedicarse al comercio, llevando y trayendo mercadería entre Arica, Chile y las provincias aledañas de Tacna. Durante estos viajes, Teodora conoció a Vicente, quien se convertiría en el compañero de su vida y quien cuidaría de ella y sus hijas. Vicente y Teodora tuvieron 4 hijos más y un perro llamado Oso, con quien formaron una gran y linda familia, querida y respetada por todos sus vecinos. Años después, Teodora tuvo que afrontar la muerte de su hijo, luego la muerte de su hija, y hace pocos años la muerte de su esposo. Sus hijos temían lo peor, mas Teodora hacía gala de su gran fortaleza. Hasta hace pocos meses, Teodora se caracterizaba por ser una mujer independiente y funcional. Cocinaba, lavaba, manejaba sus cuentas, siempre con gran autonomía. Sin embargo, los últimos meses sus hijos empezaron a notar que algo le estaba ocurriendo. Teodora empezó a guardar cosas en su habitación, cucharones, escobas, etc. Guarda dinero y no sabe dónde lo ha colocado. Se pone ansiosa por no saber dónde está el dinero. Carmen le da otro dinero para calmarla, haciéndole creer que es el dinero que ella está buscando. Cuando intentaba cocinar, olvidaba las hornillas encendidas. Por lo tanto, ya no cocina más. Demanda que su hijo esté sentado junto a ella, como cuando él era un niño. Últimamente, Teodora ya no duerme. Camina toda la noche, moviendo sus cosas de un lado a otro. Comenta que sueña con su papá y sus hermanas. Habla de su perro Oso, de su esposo y sus hijos fallecidos como si estuvieran vivos. Es como si prefiriera vivir en el tiempo de sus recuerdos más amados, el tiempo en que quizás fue más plena y feliz.
Memories of life. The first time that I saw Teodora was in some Facebook videos. She was reading and doing origami. I was so curious to meet her. Then, in the middle of my quarantine time in Peru, I contacted her daughter, Carmen. Carmen told me that Teodora was born in May 1925 in Ticaco, a small and picturesque village whose names derive from Aymara voices Tica Haku, which means place of showy flowers, located in the middle of the Andes of Tarata, Tacna, Peru. In order for Teodora to get married, being 16 years old and one of the prettiest ladies in town to follow ancient customs, her parents locked her up with an engineer who came from Lima and was passing through town. As a result of this lockdown, Teodora had her first daughter, but the marriage never took place. After a few years of Teodora being a single mother, her parents propitiated another lockdown, this time with a customs officer who was also passing through town. From this lockdown, her second daughter was born, but this marriage did not materialize either. Teodora had to become father and mother to her two young daughters. When she was 23, Teodora decided to leave her town to engage in trade, carrying and bringing merchandise between Arica, Chile, and neighboring provinces of Tacna. During these trips, Teodora met Vicente, who became the companion of her life and who would care for her and her two youngest daughters. Vicente and Teodora had 4 more children and a dog named Oso. With them, they formed a big and beautiful family, loved and respected by their neighbors. Years later, Teodora had to face the death of her son, then the death of her daughter, and a few years ago, the death of her husband. Her children feared the worst, but even then, Teodora showed her great strength. Until a few months ago, Teodora was characterized by being an independent and functional woman, cooking, washing, managing her accounts, always with great autonomy. However, in the last months, her children began to notice that something was happening to her. Teodora began to keep things in her room, ladles, brooms, etc. She keeps money and does not know where she puts it. She becomes anxious, not knowing where the money is. Carmen gives her more money to calm her, making her believe that it is the money she was looking for. When she tried to cook, she forgot the burners were on, so she no longer cooks. She insists that her son is sitting next to her, like when he was a child. Lately, Teodora no longer sleeps. She walks all night, moving her things from one place to the next. She comments that she dreams of her dad and her sisters. She talks about her dog also, her deceased husband, and children as if they were alive. It is as if she preferred to live in the time of her most loved memories, the time when perhaps she was most fulfilled and happy.
Fairy Tales, read by Ieva Petkutė. The 3 stories were told and written together with homeless people in Vilnius, Lithuania. They talked about fairy tales, forests, and sleep while taking walks, sharing tea, visiting their homes, and having creative arts activities. Most of the time, in search for a quiet place to hear and be heard.
The first story is by Rimgaudas, or Rimga, as they call him, whom I used to meet in his so-called home, and always with a book. He comes from a family of 6 brothers, and he is the oldest one. I had one sister, but she died the day she was born, and my mother could not see the path through the tears, he told me, and added then, yet we all are foundlings. I wish Rimgaudas could tell his story, such a talented and so expressive man, speaking always with a witty smile. But here I am, and I will share his story, Happy Tick, which was told in Lithuanian, and I will read translation in English. Once upon a time, near the river, there lived a happy tick. She was happy because she had 3 little baby ticks. 3 little baby ticks she had, and they all lived happily. Once, some children or alcoholics, who knows who they were, dropped a match or a cigarette. The summer was hot, and all the forest took fire. All the forest took fire. The tick decided to take her baby ticks across the river to another nest. She took one baby tick and started carrying him, and she said, "Listen, my little son, will you carry me across the river when you grow up?" And the baby tick responded, "Yes, mother, I will carry you, I will carry you." She dropped her child into the river, and the baby tick drowned. She took the second baby tick to carry across the river and said, my baby tick, will you carry me across the river?" And the baby responded, "Yes, my dear mother, I will carry you in my hands." She dropped the second baby tick to the river, and the second baby tick drowned. She took the third baby tick. My baby tick, the most beloved son, will you carry me across the river?" "No, mother, I will not carry you. Why? When I grow up, I will carry my children. You carry me and I will carry my children. Damn, why should I carry you across the river?" The second episode I will read was told by Anastasia, a tender woman, as she told me she used to deliver post in her younger age and lived together with her mother in a beautiful house with a flower garden. They lived together until her mom got sick and shortly after passed away. The loss and enormous stress and numerous other events she went through put on her a homeless shoes. When I spoke with her, her memory, as she said, was such an unfaithful friend, but all Nastasia shared with me was so beautiful and full of heart. I will read an episode in both in Lithuanian and in English. Miško bijau, gyvačių bijau. Bijau pasimesti, bijau. Vieną kartą ėjau mišką iš vienos pusės, išėjau iš kitos. Man gėlės labai patinka, labai. Namuose konvalijos kvepia. Buvo pas mus, mama augino. Yra miško konvalijos ir yra namų konvalijos. Namų kvepia vaja, o miške nieko nekvepia. Bet irgi gražios, labai gražios. Mes namuose po langais turėjom. Konvalijos labai gražios. I'm afraid of the forest. I'm afraid of the snakes. I'm afraid to get lost. I fear. Once upon a time, I entered the forest from one side and came out from another side. I was so afraid and so scared. But I like flowers very much. At home, lilies smell. They were there in our place. My mom was growing them. There are forest lilies and home lilies. The home lilies smell so much, vaya. And in the forest, they don't smell at all, but they are also beautiful, very beautiful. At home, we used to have them under the windows. Lilies are beautiful.
Mamika Lucy. These are the memories that Lastenia has regarding her mother Lucy, who noticed some changes, which she initially considered were changes that are expected to occur due to age. She shares her experience to understand a process that doctors call dementia. The interview was conducted by Marcela Marmetza and read by Marcela and in English by Stephanie Piña Escudero.
Lucy fue toda su vida una luchadora, una cucarachita martina. Ese es el término que usamos haciendo alusión a ese cuento infantil popular que representa a una mujer que siempre está haciendo cosas. Ella sacó adelante a sus 4 hijos y 8 sobrinos, quienes habían quedado huérfanos de madre y quienes también la identificaban como su madre. Tanto sus hijos como sus sobrinos la llamaban Mamika Lucy. Resulta fácil entender que trabajar y cuidar de 12 niños no fue una tarea fácil y le demandaba tener que estar haciendo múltiples actividades, sin contar que además ella le encantaba cuidar y tener mascotas, cultivar plantas. Cuando llegábamos a casa de Lucy, había que buscarla. Algunas veces Lucy estaba en su precioso jardín cultivando su nueva planta o arreglando alguna otra. O le encontrábamos jugando con sus mascotas, gatos, perros, palomas, pájaros, acogidos en su casa. O estaba Lucy en algún rincón limpiando, arreglando cosas. O encontrábamos a Lucy en su cocina, preparando sus deliciosos manjares. Son memorables algunas frases de Lucy como: siempre debe haber algo rico en casa para invitar a quien tenga la gentileza de venir a visitarte. O aquello que decía: nadie debe salir de tu casa con hambre. O lo otro: a la visita no se le ofrece, se le sirve. Ya tenía cumplidos Lucy 85 años y la cucarachita Martina mantenía su rutina de vida siempre activa. Tenía en la mente la fecha de cumpleaños y platos favoritos de sus 12 hijos y 31 nietos, a los cuales acostumbraba a visitar o llamar en su cumpleaños, y cuando iba de visita siempre llegaba con las manos llenas. Pero luego de unas pocas horas, ella decía: debo regresar a casa, mis perros, mis gatos, mi paloma esperan por mí. Esa era Mamika Lucy, una cucarachita martina con espacio para todos en su casa y en su corazón. Cuando Lucy cumplió 87 años, fui notando algunos cambios. Se estaba haciendo frecuente encontrar a Lucy sentada. Eso era raro. Y en su jardín, algunas de sus plantas estaban perdiendo su color. Ya no había comida para las palomas y los pájaros, y ellos habían emprendido vuelo. Se le habían olvidado algunos cumpleaños. Eso era extraño. Sería razonable pensar que Lucy, a sus casi 90 años, había empezado a tener o había decidido querer tener una vida más sosegada. ¿O era acaso innecesario que Lucy iniciara el momento del descanso? Lucy acostumbraba a alternar las visitas por fiesta de Navidad entre las diferentes casas de sus hijos. Cuando había cumplido 88 años, le tocaba viajar a otra ciudad, a casa de su hija mayor. Lucy, durante ese viaje aéreo, se desorientó. El viaje no duró más de 1 hora. Le costó reconocer a su hija mayor y a sus nietos, quienes la esperaban. Durante su estancia manifestó mucha angustia, ansiedad y reiteraba continuamente su deseo de volver a casa. Esa vez tuvimos que adelantar su retorno. ¿Qué le pasó a Lucy? Fue algo que yo y mis hermanos nos preguntamos. ¿Acaso debíamos haberla acompañado en el viaje? ¿O debimos haberla enviado en silla de ruedas? No lo habíamos considerado necesario, porque Lucy había viajado repetidas veces. Y Lucy escuchaba bien, veía bien, caminaba bien. Cuando Lucy cumplió 90 años, cada vez nos costaba más sacarla de su casa e incluso algunas veces sacarla de su cuarto. Decidí llevarle la comida porque Lucy estaba tomando la costumbre de cocinar siempre la misma menestra y ya no solía invitar sus manjares a sus visitas. Algo dentro de mí me decía, algo pasa, Lucy. No podía ser solo la edad, por más que fuera ese el diagnóstico, el comentario de los médicos que evaluaron a Lucy, o esa era la explicación que muchos miembros de mi familia me decían. Son los 90 años, la astenia. Manica Lucy ya está vieja.
Lucy was a fighter all her life. We called her Cockroach Martina, which is the term we use alluding to a children's story, and it represents a woman who is always doing things. She raised 4 children and 8 nephews who had been orphaned and identified Lucy as their mother. Everyone, both her children and her nephews, called her Mamica Lucy, which is similar to Mommy Lucy. Working and caring for 12 children was not an easy task and required her to do multiple activities, not to mention that she also loved having pets and growing plants. When we arrived at Lucy's house, we had to look for her. Sometimes Lucy was in her beautiful garden, cultivating her new plant or caring for another, or we would find her playing with her pets, cats, dogs, pigeons sheltered in the house, or Lucy was somewhere cleaning, fixing things, or perhaps she was in her kitchen preparing delicious delicacies. Some of Lucy's phrases are memorable. You should always have something delicious at home to invite whoever has the courtesy to visit you. Nobody should leave your house hungry. Or you don't offer food to those who visit you. You simply serve it. She was already 85 years old, and Cockroach Martina had kept her life a routine, always active. She had in her mind the birthday and the favorite dish of her 12 children and her 31 grandchildren, which she usually visited or called on their birthdays. When she went to visit, she always went with her hands full, but after a few hours she told them, I must return home. My cats and my dogs wait for me. That was Mamica Lucy, a Martina cockroach with room for everyone in her house and in her heart. When Lucy turned 87, I noticed some changes. I would frequently find Lucy sitting in her garden. Some of her plants were losing their color. There was no food for the pigeons and they started to fly away. She had forgotten some birthdays. Being almost 90 years old, it would be reasonable for Lucy to have a calmer life, and perhaps it was very necessary that she arrive to a moment of rest. Lucy used to take turns to spend Christmas at all of her children's homes. When she turned 88, she had to travel to a different city to visit her oldest daughter. Lucy got disoriented during the 1-hour flight. And when she arrived, she had trouble recognizing her daughter and her grandchildren. She expressed distress and anxiety, and she kept saying that she wanted to go home. We had to send her back earlier. What had happened to Lucy? Was a question my siblings and I started asking each other. Should we have traveled with her? Should we have sent her in a wheelchair? We had not considered those things, since she had traveled a lot of times before and her hearing, sight, and gait were perfect. Lucy turned 90, and it became harder and harder for her to get out of the house, even out of her room. Now, when I went to her house, I had to bring food with me, since she just cooked the same dishes all the time, and she had lost the habit of cooking for visitors. Inside of me, I could tell that something was going on with Lucy. It couldn't be just age. No matter how much that was the explanation from some of the physicians and even from some members of my family. They always said, Lastenia is old now. That's how things are.
The final act of caring. Ann Norton, who lives in Bermuda, was the main caregiver for her mother for over a decade. Her mother, Mrs. Powell, was a wonderful artist and very fun woman. She lost her sight initially and later developed Alzheimer's. The interview spanned a wide range of topics about Mrs. Powell and Ann as her carer. This excerpt is Ann reflecting on her mother's death. Her story will be read by her interviewer, Sarah D'Alessio.
My name's Ann Norton. I'm a nurse and was my mother's caregiver for 14 years in her home until she died in February 2020. I spent a lot of time during the lockdown wondering why I was reacting the way I was to my mother's death. I suddenly thought, I didn't get to nurse her through to her death. I think I always had this vision that she would be home and I would be holding her hand. I didn't want to take her to the hospital because we weren't going to be doing anything if this was it. I just wanted her to stay comfortable and to go when it was her time. But at the same time, if all she needed was fluids, then maybe that's what we should do. The doctor said that's probably a good idea and they can assess her and then I would know what we're dealing with. So we took her to hospital, and after seeing she had a large aneurysm on the ultrasound, there was nothing more to do but to keep her comfortable, surrounded by love until the end. I was there with her at the end. I was holding her hand, but I didn't get to lay her out, which is one of, for me, the final act of caring that I can do. I always found nursing the dying patient a privilege. Back in the 70s in England, there was a full ritual of laying them out. I found it something I liked, for a want of a better word. It was the final thing I could do. We would bathe them, get them in a shroud. Sounds pretty morbid to some. When I did my refresher course in the 90s here in Bermuda and somebody died on one of the shifts, I asked, "You want me to go lay them out?" They said, "Oh no, we don't do that anymore. They just wrap them." I was just horrified. It was because of me she was in hospital. Lauren, my daughter-in-law, says, "I think Grandma wanted you to take her to the hospital so you would know what's going on, and so you would know there was nothing more you could have done." I keep telling myself, though, I should have known. Julie, my friend and another nurse, told me in no uncertain terms that I should not have known. She says, "You were her daughter that day, and you reacted as a daughter." So I'm getting there with that concept.
La abuela ya no es la misma. Isabel grew up in a small town in Ayacucho, Peru. She worked until a few months ago as a lawyer in the Palace of Justice in Lima, the capital of Peru. She lived alone, but she decided to bring her mother to live with her after her father died in 2016. She shared her mother's story with Sheila Castro Suarez, who was reading in Spanish. Didem Utz will read in English.
Voy a compartir la historia de mi abuela contada por mi tía Isabel, quien me dijo, la abuela ya no es la misma. Mis padres vivían en un pequeño pueblo en la Sierra de Perú. A mi madre le encantaba vivir allá, porque además de trabajar en el hospital como obstetriz, podía compartir sus días con la familia. Cuando mi madre estaba sana, se mostraba como una mujer muy fuerte y alegre. Ella trabajó en el hospital hasta sus 65 años. Luego se dedicó a las actividades de la casa y ayudaba a mi padre en los asuntos de la ganadería. Yo siempre los invité a vivir conmigo aquí en Lima, pero ellos no se acostumbraban. Lo que más me preocupaba eran las limitaciones que tenían para su atención en salud. Mi padre falleció hace 4 años, lo cual nos generó un gran dolor. Mi madre, que lucía tan fuerte, se derrumbó y no podía superar esta pérdida. Esta situación me motivó a traer a mi madre a vivir conmigo, a pesar que mis hermanas se opusieron inicialmente. Poco a poco nos fuimos acostumbrando. Además aquí la evaluaron los médicos y le encontraron la presión alta, el corazón grande y también problemas en la aorta. Pero a pesar de todo esto, estábamos muy bien. Vivíamos solo las dos. Ella se recuperó. Estaba contenta. Desde hace aproximadamente 2 años, fui observando su deterioro. Varias cosas ya no eran las mismas. Ella empezó a presentar olvidos. Un día, en el que nos encontrábamos almorzando, me fui por un momento a la cocina, mientras ella comía. Y cuando regresé, vi que había colocado sus muelas, es decir, sus prótesis dentales en la sopa. ¡Ja, ja, ja, ja! Eché una carcajada. En un inicio me causó gracia, pero luego no. Me quedé sorprendida y me preguntaba, ¿qué pasó aquí? Ella se mostraba contenta con lo que había hecho. Me miraba sonriente. Para mí estaba mal. Entonces pensé, ¿cuándo empezó esto? Probablemente hace mucho tiempo. Desde aquel instante empecé a observarla más seguido y con más atención. Ella había cambiado. Me necesitaba más en el día a día y es cuando decidí pedir ayuda. La llevé a consulta y luego que el médico la evaluó me dijo, señora, su madre tiene demencia. Desde el momento en que me enteré de su diagnóstico, mi vida cambió totalmente. No ha sido lo mismo. Fue un gran golpe. Yo lloré mucho. Me preguntaba, ¿por qué una persona que fue muy fuerte no lo era más? La convivencia no ha sido fácil. Trastocó toda mi vida. Uno desarrolla un gran sentimiento de responsabilidad que se va asumiendo en el día a día. Entender la enfermedad de mi mamá ha sido parte de un proceso. Yo llamé a mi sobrina, que es médico, y es quien me hizo entender que mi mamá había crecido, que no sería más la misma y que estos cambios cada vez serían mayores. Yo tengo entendido que las personas que tienen demencia necesitan mucho amor, mucho cariño, y quién mejor que yo para cuidarla. Yo me he convertido ahora en su mamá.
My parents lived in a small village in the mountains of Peru, together with my sisters and grandchildren. When my mother was healthy, she was a powerful and happy woman. She worked as an obstetrician until she was 65 years old. Then she took care of the household chores and managed the activities related to livestock together with my father. However, I saw their health needs and limitations and invited them to live with me in here, Lima, but they didn't accept it. My father passed away 4 years ago, which caused us great pain. My mother, who looked so strong, collapsed. She could not overcome this loss. This situation motivated me to bring my mother to live with me, even though my sisters initially opposed it. Little by little, we got used to it. At the hospital, they evaluated her and found her high blood pressure, enlarged heart, and also problems in her aorta. But despite all this, we were very well. She was happy. Over the past 2 years, I was noticed that my mom is not the same. Several things were no longer the same. She had memory loss, and I noticed several changes. One day, when we were having lunch, I went for a moment to the kitchen while she was eating, and when I came back, I saw that she had put her dentures into the soup. At first, I was amused, but then I wasn't. I was surprised, and I asked myself what happened here. She was happy with what she had done. She looked at me smiling. It was wrong to me. Then I said to myself, this didn't start here, but a long time ago. From that moment on, I began to observe her more often and with more attention. She needed me more and more daily, and that's when I decided to ask for help. I took her to the doctor's office, and after the doctor evaluated her, she told me, your mother has dementia. From the moment I knew my mother had dementia, I was invaded by a deep sadness. It was a big blow. I cried a lot. I asked myself why a person who was very strong in her life now was not strong anymore. The family life changed. It has not been easy. It disrupts my whole life, but I have a great feeling of responsibility, which is assumed in daily living. Understanding my mother's illness was part of a process. I called my niece, a doctor, and she helped me understand that my mom was not the same anymore. I understand that people who have dementia need a lot of love, a lot of affection. I have become her mother now.
Richard was born and raised in San Francisco. His one and only job was teaching at a university in Florida for 34 years. He retired 20 years ago and returned to live at his childhood home, where he has lived since. He and his brother cared for his mother, who suffered from dementia. Interview was conducted and is read by Niall Kavanagh.
My mother had serious dementia. She was in her mid-80s when it started. One day I looked up and she was walking down the street, and I said, "Where are you going?" "We're in Florida." And she says, "I'm going home to San Francisco." I said, "How are you going to get there?" She says, "I'm going to walk." And I said, "Do you have any money?" She opened her fist and there was 1 penny in her hand. It was completely out of character. The hardest part of being a caregiver was wondering what was going to happen tomorrow. It would have been nice to have somebody to talk to. The only people we talked to were doctors, and you couldn't get anything out of them. Maybe because they didn't really know anything about her. It's all new to you. At the time, there might have been a social reluctance to talk about these things, but it's cathartic, and it helps to set expectations. That way, tomorrow won't be as much of a mystery as it was to me. Every once in a while, there would be a huge laugh because of a joke she unintentionally told. One time she said, "What day is it?" And I said, "It's Thursday." She said, "No, it can't be Thursday. It's got to be Saturday or Sunday." And I said, "Mom, I had class today. I teach on Thursday. After class, I visit you." She says, "No, it's got to be Saturday or Sunday." And then finally she says, "Okay, it may be Thursday for you, but it's Saturday or Sunday for me." Eventually, she couldn't or didn't talk. There was still a lot going on up there. It just didn't get out of her mouth. I would say things, and there was just nothing in response. One day I said, "Ma, I'm going to squeeze your hand. I love you very much. If you love me, squeeze my hand." And I got a squeeze. The day she died, it was clear the end was near. Just the way she was breathing. And I thought she might be comforted by religious words. So I went up to a guy doing a religious service nearby and asked him to say something. He came in with a little girl and he said some very comforting things. The girl grabbed my mother's hand and held it. It was a beautiful moment. Even if my mother didn't get any comfort, I sure as hell did. When I look back, I tend to remember those moments, not the more difficult ones.
This has been wonderful. We'd like to thank all of our readers, all of our narrators who are willing to have their stories shared. We'd like to thank Camellia for her beautiful musical interludes. We'd also like to thank our technical crew, Winnie Sue, Andrew Filipoff, and Ronan Bronick. Before we conclude, we'd like to invite GBHI Curriculum Manager Mindy Matice to share a few thoughts.
There we go. What we've heard today is the result of our delightful Hearsay Summer Elective course. This is the first time that we've run this as a selective, and this course is the first time where we've had staff and fellows participating in a course together. These incredible stories seem to me to be another affirmation that this community has a shared commitment to the goals that we all hold so dear, one of which is to strive to listen more deeply to those that are living with or helping to care for the aged or those with dementia. I feel so fortunate to be a part of this community that is bringing light into such an overlooked dimension of our lives.
Thank you so much, Mindy. Many thanks to everyone that participated today and everyone that tuned in to listen to these stories. We're so glad to be part of a community of listeners devoted to hearing these stories. We will look forward to being back soon with another installment of Hearsay Readers Theater. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you soon.